Hi, my name is Adriana Semra, and this is the presentation for class Applied Data Visualization for the Masters of Applied Business Analytics at Jacksonville University. In this presentation, I'll go over an e-commerce dataset analysis, from choosing the dataset, performing ETL data transformations, to describing graphs and dashboard visualizations that I built using Tableau and R. We will finalize the presentation interpreting our findings and providing recommendations to executive management for e-commerce optimization to help grow online sales revenue and improve business operations. First, I'll introduce our dataset. The dataset of choice here is an e-commerce online sales dataset. I chose to work with an e-commerce dataset for my analysis because it clearly represents key metrics and analysis that helps identify trends in sales, customer behavior, and operations within an organization. So it's very closely related to real-world operations. Data visualization tools that we use in this project will help transform the raw data into decisions using charts, KPI cards, dashboards, maps, etc. And the tools we use to do that include Tableau dashboards, R statistical graphs, and MySQL. So we chose to work with an e-commerce dataset that includes order, customers, product, pricing, geography, payments information. We have 10,000 transaction level records in this dataset. We also have fields that are categorical in nature, like categories, subcategories, states, payment methods. We have numerical fields like sales, price, and discount. And we also have time-related fields, which are order dates, shipping dates, and delivery dates. And at 10,000 rows, this original dataset is large enough to support meaningful aggregation and pattern detection. It's small enough to clean, analyze, and visualize. This is a synthetic dataset available publicly on the internet. Therefore, I found some discrepancies in the data when I first looked into the dataset. And one of them was the incorrect states definitions for the USA. In the original dataset, we had a column for country listed as India and states in the United States. So I had to transform the data using MySQL to update the country column to United States. Another problem that I noticed was that the order status column only had the value delivered, which is not realistic. In online sales, we know that some orders will be delivered, some will be canceled, some will be refunded, and so on. I also noticed that the ship date was sometimes earlier than the order date, which is not correct. In the real world situation, the order date will come first and then the ship date. So I had to transform those data into correct values to be able to perform correct analysis. The same thing happened with delivery date being earlier than ship date, which is not realistic. So I had to transform delivery date to a later date after ship. For the dataset cleaning phase, I used MySQL to create a database and then inspect the columns, inspect the values, and then perform updates using MySQL to transform the data into more realistic data to be able to perform analysis, create charts, etc. So the purpose of this dataset is to answer key business questions related to sales revenue performance, product and category contribution to sales, geographic performance, pricing and discount impact, and operational efficiency. Now we'll dive into the data insights, and I'll demonstrate using Tableau and R charts how we can visualize the data to answer the questions we proposed. First thing we're going to look into is the overall sales performance for this dataset, this company during a period of time. So I created a KPI card for us to have a look at the total sales, the total number of orders, and then derive the average order value and find out if what's driving performance is average order value or volume of sales. And with this first analysis, we can already answer that the revenue is driven by high value transactions, not volume, as the average order value on this data set is $64,000. Then I dived a little bit deeper to look into revenue by category, how sales is distributed evenly across the categories, the main categories of electronic, home, and fashions. These are the three main categories in our data set. So we see we don't have a clearly dominant category. They are pretty much divided equally in thirds within the data set. Next, we're going to answer questions about subcategory performance. And within these categories, I created this chart for us to identify what are the top 3 categories, the bottom 3 categories, and what's within the middle of that. Our next question asks about performance by state within the USA. And I created this map chart where we can visualize the percentage of sales within each state. And we can also filter within the USA. We can filter by state, or we can even filter by region and see which regions in the US are performing better than others. So this pareto analysis shows that the revenue in this data set is moderately concentrated among the subset of product categories. So we can see that furniture, clothing, footwear, and kitchen are driving 80% of the sales, while the other 3 categories are not making a huge difference in this case. This chart now is talking about daily sales stability and process variation. So we want to know if the daily sales are stable over time, or if there are statistically significant variations that indicate process instability or abnormality. This next chart will represent order value versus the revenue over time. So we can see if the sales performance is affected by the number of transactions or by the value of each order. This scatter plot, pricing, discount, and sales relationship chart will help us analyze the trend line between changing pricing, applying discounts to the sales revenue generated. While pricing is key for revenue, discounts and how much customers buy can change the results a lot. Our next chart is a simple bar chart that compares the payment methods versus transaction value. So we want to look into what types of payments, if any, are driving more sales. So we see that different payment types do not really impact as much on our sales revenue. Like I mentioned in the beginning, some of this data had to be transformed in order for us to generate this graph. So that's why you can see a very large difference between delivered, shipped, and canceled statuses. But if these were real data, then we can derive from this analysis that performance of the business is strong, as most orders, over 95% of the orders, are being delivered. Now that we identify the questions that the business needs to answer in terms of sales revenue, and also each graph will help us visualize trends, opportunities, revenue, growth, etc. I put together dashboards so we can actually group these concepts together and make the understanding of the data clear. It starts with a summary of key metrics, which is the overall sales performance. And then it shows also revenue by category. So we dive deep into the main categories that are driving revenue. Then we identify the subcategories that are driving 80% of our sales. And then finally, the time series chart is tracking sales over time, highlighting changes, peaks, and short-term trends. Our second dashboard is based on geographic performance and market distribution. So we will look at both charts that represent state revenue, which is the revenue by state with the USA map in the bottom, and the top performance state revenue, which are the top performance and the bottom performance. Green states have higher sales contributions, and the red ones obviously have lower sales distributions. In this dashboard, you can also filter by state, so you can select all states, or you can do the see on Alabama, for example, or you can even filter by region. You can take all of that and see only how the east side of the U.S. is performing versus the west side of the U.S. The third dashboard that I built and I'm going to look into is pricing, behavior, and operations. In summary, this dashboard is showing that the business is stable and predictable, with revenue coming from pricing. So we already looked at the discount versus pricing impact, and we know that discount is not making a huge difference in our sales volume. And because customer behavior is steady and operations are strong, with most orders being delivered, the company is ready to grow. So the best strategy that we can derive from this dashboard is to increase the order volume and fine-tune pricing while keeping the operations efficient and avoid discounts that could lower revenue. Now I'll show you some of my R charts that help support our analysis as well. So the first one I created was the simple scorecard for the overall sales performance using R. So in this case, I'm using annotate function here. and to place the labels, the text, directly on the blank ggplot canvas, which will show each KPI as its own card here. So I calculate the KPI card by creating a KPI card function that does the calculation that's necessary to actually calculate the total sales, total orders, and average order value. And then I finally combine the three of them and I annotate into the scorecard. The next chart we're going to look into is the average order value by product category. We've already analyzed a similar chart in Tableau, so I'll just explain a little bit of how I've done this chart in R. So after loading the data set, I needed to convert some of the fields, the total sales fields, to numeric. And I proceeded to calculate the AOV by category. So I grouped the categories and I calculated the average order value. And then I sorted by descending areas, so you can see which one is the category that contributes the most first at the top. And then I finally created a bar chart using ggplot. My third chart is the delivery time by product category and answers the question, how does delivery time vary across product categories? So for this chart, I am converting the dates into date and time format so we can calculate the number of days between delivery time and ship time for each one of the categories. Then using the functions box plot here, the geom_box plot, I was able to create the box plot for each one of the categories. So the ggplot function setting up the chart with the product category on X axis down the bottom here, electronics, fashion, and home. And also the time, the number of days that it took to deliver the order in the y-axis. Finally, we're going to look into story points in Tableau, and this is where we build the story about data, which is something I introduced in the beginning of this presentation. So instead of having the charts scattered about, we group them together and we tell the story of data and making the information easy to understand. So the first thing I wanted to show was that the business generates high revenue driven by key categories. So for that, I created a story point that shows overall sales performance and the revenue by category. And I made an annotation here that high average order of about 64,000 performance is driven primarily by high value transactions rather than high order volume. And the recommendation is to protect the high order values and increase the volume through customer acquisitions and premium strategies. So in this point, we can see that the top subcategories of furniture, clothing, and footwear are the main sources of revenue and could explain strong customer interest, good pricing, or effective product placement. And we can see that the 80% sales drivers to furniture, clothing, footwear, and kitchen account for approximately 8% of sales. And we see a bit of a risk here where companies relying too heavily on product on these four segments and not enough on the other three segments that we have. So we have opportunity to explore laptop, mobile, and accessory sales to make sure that our categories even up in sales volume. Next, we look at how the geographic distribution happens for this data set. Sales are spread out and fairly evenly balanced out, but under optimized market structure. So the recommendation here is to increase marketing investments in places like North Carolina, Arizona, and Mexico, improve underperforming states like Montana, and identify what works in top states, and apply the same approach to the mid and low performance. Story point number 4 is about time and growth. So in our daily sales performance over time chart, we see that a narrow range of approximately 14 million to 18 million. The business is operating at a steady revenue baseline with no clear growth or decline during this period of time from December 29 to February 12. And the growth strategy here is to increase transaction volume through customer acquisition, improve conversion rates, and target promotional efforts. Now, pricing, discount, and sales relationship. Discounting, we already saw that in the charts, that does not always lead to higher revenue. As unit prices increase, the total sale also tends to rise. So higher priced items usually bring in more revenue. And at this final stage of the analysis now, we focus from what drives revenue to how reliable the business process is. And this control chart shows that the daily sales stays within the limits. Blue line here within the limits, the top and bottom LCL and UCL. So sales vary slightly. So this means that the sales process is stable and predictable with no major surprises. And the order status distribution down here, with delivered orders being the most, 98% of all of the statuses. So the recommendation here is to focus on scaling volume while maintaining current operational efficiency, since the process is stable and capable of supporting growth without introducing risk. Summarizing our analysis showing that a stable and predictable business is driven by high volume transactions with consistent sales between 14 million and 18 million, and the average order value of 64K. It is concentrated in 3 subcategories at the moment, with furniture, clothing, and footwear. So we are recommending to review weaker subcategories to see if the new strategies help them lift up and if resources should be shifted to stronger areas. Customer behavior remains consistent. Cross-payment methods and operations are efficient, with most orders delivered within 2 and 3 days. So overall, the business is well positioned to scale by increasing order volume and maintaining stronger pricing strategies. Now I want to finalize by talking about the lessons I learned in this course. So first of all, data quality directly impacts conclusions. So when I first selected my data set, I noticed discrepancies and I knew I had to work on them. So data cleaning is critical before analysis. Another thing I noticed is that different charts answer different business questions. So things like the part of the chart can answer questions about which categories drive 80% of our revenue. So that was a very valuable lesson to help me understand how charts answer business questions. And that visualization is communication and not just charts. Just having the charts on themselves is very difficult to interpret the data and draw conclusions. So that's where storytelling connects insights into decisions. It was very valuable to learn Tableau and NAR as well, so I could see how charts that I created in Tableau could also be recreated in R. Having the flexibility to use both tools to interpret the data is very valuable in terms of presenting our analysis and then discussing our findings and recommending future actions. The business context matters a lot as much as the technical execution. So knowing which questions to ask is as important as answering them and providing the visuals to help support our decisions. And finally, iterative troubleshooting is part of the workflow. So through the process of creating all of those 13 charts and plus 3R charts, there was a lot of troubleshooting, learning from tutorials, watching YouTube videos, reading articles, and that's all part of the process. Getting the chart right just takes a fair bit of time, but I was able to do that with the help of online resources. Thank you. I found the course very valuable, and that's my presentation for today.